Hey, so on today's episode, we're not going to do a full review, but we're going to talk about the Hobbit trilogy and what went wrong. So, I watched this movie in theaters, all three of them, and I did like them. It was one of the first fantasy movies I ever saw in my life. And the reason that was because, well, I should say, I also was very against seeing any fantasy movies or anything related to like Lord of the Rings, or The Hobbit, or Harry Potter, Star Wars. The only franchise film I would ever watch is like Indiana Jones, really, or superhero films. And the reason for that is, for some reason, my dad always would tell me that like all those things were gay, so I never did. And but I was with my cousins when the first Hobbit film came out, and they kind of forced me to watch it, and I did enjoy it. And I didn't see The Hobbit for many years, however many years that was. Let's see. It came out 2012, so like 8 years. And then in 2020, I watched it with my friends, Ethan and Raj, and well, I did like it, and I still do like it. I'm not saying the movie's bad. However, I did significantly overrate it in my IMDb. I gave it a both number one and two an 8.7 or like 8.8. I just can't in good conscience keep that rating. And the reason I say that is what I'm going to say in this video, but um, I would like to clarify. I do think they're good films. They're very entertaining, but they have a lot of flaws. And if we're comparing them to The Lord of the Rings, they're not good films. It kind of reminds me of how Godfather 3, as a standalone film, is like, yeah, it's good. Like, yeah, obviously it has problems. You can tell it's flawed, but it's overall good. But then, like, when you bring in the fact that it was preceded by Godfather 1 and 2, you're like, oh wow, this is really not very good. And that's how I feel about Lord of the Rings. I mean, sorry, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings being the superior product that preceded it. Um, and, I don't know why I liked it so much when I watched it 4 years ago. Um, Perhaps it's just because I was hyped to see it again. That very well could be a big reason. Like, I hadn't seen it in many years. Um, I don't know. But let's get into the first movie. Um, or should I? No, no, no. I'll first say like what I've learned doing some research in the past like week. I watched a Critical Drinker video about The Hobbit, and I've watched some other like shorts on YouTube that have sort of explained like why The Hobbit was so much worse than The Lord of the Rings, which it's sort of shocking because it's the same director, same production company. It's a great story. It's a great book, which I read as when I was in middle school. Um, So what went wrong? And what I found out is basically these films were originally supposed to be directed by Guillermo del Toro, and then he like dropped out of the project, and like last minute Peter Jackson was brought back in. They basically didn't give him any creative freedom. He was sort of forced to make three films, which if you don't know, the Hobbit book is about 200 pages. I think a little bit under 200, depending on how big the font size you've bought the book in. So making three almost 3 hour films out of 200 pages is really not a good idea and is essentially a cash grab. And basically, Peter Jackson was forced to make a bunch of stuff up and put a bunch of dumb stuff in the films that don't make sense and really, really draw out the source material. And in the Battle of the Five Armies, which is rated the lowest of the movies, I watched some behind the scenes footage where like Peter Jackson like didn't even get to do proper pre-production, and he didn't even know exactly how the battle was going to be because they didn't give him sufficient time or the creative freedom. If you don't know, these three movies came out 2012, 2013, and 2014. That's crazy. 1 year after another. Let's compare that with Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings has a 2 year gap in between, which, is still really good. But let's see, hold on. 2001. Oh, actually, no. Okay, I stand corrected. They also have a 1 year gap, so I guess the year wasn't the problem. I suppose it's just that he didn't get to write it properly and he wasn't given creative freedom. I stand corrected on that. But that is impressive that they did Lord of the Rings with 1 year in between. Okay. So yeah, that was a big problem with the writing of this. And like I said, the first one's like 2 hours 50 minutes, second one 2 hour 40, and then the third one is 2 hour 20. And okay, so and then another problem that's obvious is like all the genius direction and production value of the Lord of the Rings, like using practical filmmaking techniques and just using CGI to enhance it, has been completely abandoned here. It's all shot on digital too. It looks like far cheaper, far less realistic, far less beautiful. Like some of my favorite shots, I would say, are in the Fellowship of the Ring. Like maybe top 50. I could pick a few out of there. And even like some from Return of the King, I really, really love. I'm not sure about Two Towers, but I'm sure there's like one or two that could be in like a top 100. And yeah, but the direction part's kind of obvious. And the last part would be the dialogue is very, very, very simplistic and exposition based. It's like there's really no complexity at all. It's just a bunch of characters like saying like obvious things related to what's happening, and you can really tell they made up a bunch of crap and the writing wasn't very good because the source material was stripped bare and like stretched. So yeah, let's talk about Unexpected Journey now. So this film starts with like some flashbacks, or really flash forwards to Lord of the Rings, because this is a prequel. And then we like follow the main story of Bilbo Baggins, who's played by Martin Freeman, who generally does a good job, but like also he's not properly developed, I would say, to what he should be. And basically what happens is like a quest is established between these 13 dwarves or dwarfs and Bilbo and Gandalf, and they're going to reclaim their home, which is occupied currently by a dragon who is taking all their gold. So it's kind of like biblical. Even though J.R.R. Tolkien didn't like allegory, and he said like, yeah, I'm not writing comparisons to real life, but like I do like that it kind of reminds me of the story of like Exodus and, going back to your home and the Holy Land and all that. And that was really cool. And I do like some of the characters that were introduced. Like Thorin, I thought was pretty good up this far, but I feel like he gets more and more unlikable as the movies go on. And I'll tell you where I thought he was the best, but we'll get to that. Yeah, and the dragon's name is Smaug. Alright, so basically they do a bunch of stuff, they're adventuring around, it's pretty entertaining, and they visit the elves, and they're kind of not as beautiful as they used to be. The way it's shot is not as beautiful, but it's still quite good. And then, like, there's this weird scene where, like, Elrond and Galadriel and Saruman are there, and they're kind of like doing some generic dialogue. And then there's this like really half-hearted attempt, which is a big problem with the Hobbit movies, of like tying it into Lord of the Rings and trying to make it like a cinematic universe, kind of like making it all connected, when while it is loosely connected in the books, it's not connected to the point of what this movie does, where it really, really tries to like connect the two with like very thin evidence. Like Gandalf is so convinced that Sauron is trying to take back or take the kingdom under the mountain, the kingdom of Erebor, and it just seems like really dumb and like I just don't know. It just seems stupid and poorly explained and built up. And there's this really, really shitty villain that's the main villain called Azog, the Defiler, who has this stupid, like, backstory with Thorin, where Thorin cut off his arm, and that's, like, his motivation for wanting to kill Thorin. And he's just, like, this generic generic orc character. And, yeah, he's just really generic. Which is sad, because Sauron was such an amazing villain, same with Saruman. And basically the film ends, the party is oh no, I actually got to talk about this. There's a scene in the mines, which is, I would say, the most significant scene from this whole movie. They're taken to the mines by these goblins, and basically Bilbo is separated from the pack and he falls in this crevice, and this is where he meets Gollum. Gollum, if you remember, is, Gollum, Smeagol, who is the holder of the ring at this time. And basically, this is the best scene in the movie. And it's like the scene where Bilbo shines. It's where the film shines. It's like all from the book, basically. And it's just really well done. And it's like where you really feel that this movie is like a really good movie. And I just wish there was more of that. And less very goofy action scenes. Which I must say, like, the action is so much worse in these films. Like, they're really CGI'd up, kind of dumb, bloodless action. Not very good. And what was I gonna say? Yeah, so Bilbo basically outwits Gollum for the ring, and that's where he gets it. And there's a terrible, terrible scene where the dwarfs escape on this wooden raft that falls like 1,000 feet, and somehow they are completely unharmed, and even the raft doesn't fully break. It's not a raft, it's like a scaffolding. And at this point, by doing this, the film suspends all notion that these characters are actually in trouble. Like, it's just plot armor. And it's really dumb, but there's a lot of action scenes like this where it makes no sense. So yeah, they all survive, and they're sort of chased down to this cliff by Azog, the Defiler, and then like the eagles from Lord of the Rings come and save them, and they go off, and yeah, that's the movie. So I would say my updated rating of this movie is an 8 out of 10. I would consider it a good movie that like has a good story that's deeply flawed. But it has like some moments that I would say are pretty great, like the scene with Gollum, like I said, and the premise is really good. I love the idea of like a band of dwarves and a hobbit and a wizard go out to reclaim, this grand kingdom with all this gold protected by a dragon. It just sounds really cool. And it is. But the film has so many missteps along the way. I would say the first misstep is I would say the first misstep is like Thorin perhaps is a little bit too unlikable, and like the whole conflict with Azog is definitely like just really inch deep and like really not complex or interesting in the slightest. And that's probably the biggest problem with the characters there. But yeah, let's go to the second one. Desolation of Smog. I really liked watching this movie in theaters, and I liked it again here, but it suffers from the same problems with the first movie. It's trying to like tie it into freaking Lord of the Rings. Not a good idea. It doesn't really work. But they finally make it to Erebor, which is the kingdom under the mountain, and this part's really cool. The gold. You know what? The gold is just absolutely beautiful. I can see why these dwarves like it so much. And I'm pissed off at the dragon that he's sitting on the gold and taking the gold. And Bilbo goes down there, talks to the dragon. It's a great scene. And I think Smaug is a good villain. But the problem is, like, in the next film, he dies. So he's kind of wasted. But in this, he's generally good. There's a bunch of stuff. There's like a bunch of added characters. There's some forced romances between Tauriel and the dwarf guy, etc., etc. I don't want to do a whole synopsis. There's also this really weird part of the movie that is completely abandoned where Bilbo basically bumps into Thorin as he's leaving Smaug's like nest, like fleeing for his life. And Thorin is like, "Do you have the Arkenstone?" which is the king's jewel basically. It gives the king like legitimacy and he covets it. He's obsessed with it. And Bilbo doesn't really answer, and Thorin is like very suspicious, and he's like, "Did you find it?" And I think he says like, "You did, didn't you?" Or he says something like that, but it's like, it's obvious that he thinks that Bilbo has it. But then the dragon comes and they all have to run. And the film ends with Smaug going to Burn Lake Town, and there's a bunch of really unrealistic action scenes where the dwarfs like can hide behind like a very thin pillar and fire comes but they don't burn. It's very unrealistic, but it's entertaining action, no doubt. I would give this movie like an 8.2 maybe. I like it. It's entertaining. I enjoy it, but it suffers from the same problems. Just kind of like dumb action scenes, but less dumb action scenes, I would say. All these movies kind of like turn the elves into like CGI superhero action heroes, and it really just looks quite stupid. Okay, also this film makes the ridiculous decision of bringing Legolas back, who's significantly older, and serves no purpose to the plot other than fan service. And he's just basically like tails around Tauriel, who's the female elf character, and like kind of wants her affection, but he never gets it. And then at the end of the third movie, he's like, "No, it will be fine," to quote Tauriel, and is like, "I'm leaving, Dad." His dad is the king, like a woodland king of the elves. He was pretty cool. So yeah, he's just in this movie and does nothing, and is kind of doesn't remind me of the original character at all. And no, he's not in the books. So yeah, Smaug fucks off, goes to the lake town, is gonna kill everybody, and yeah, cliffhanger. So, Battle of the Five Armies. Believe it or not, even though this is the lowest rated film and people rightly criticize it, the beginning of the film is actually like has some of my favorite moments. But we first have to talk about the flaws. The biggest flaw with the beginning of this film is they literally kill off Smaug in the first 15 minutes. The main villain, the one with the most potential, dead. And in kind of like a hilarious scene where Bard the bowman uses his son's shoulders as a makeshift bow. It's just, once again, a very dumb action scene that really takes away from the film. And then, like, Lake Town's burnt. They're all refugees, so they go to the mountain, and basically what's happening, and this is the part of the film I like, and the part of Thorin's character I like, he's just alone in the mountain, like, stuck with his own thoughts, looking for the Arkenstone, and he's just, like, looking at all the gold, and he's like, such treasure. And he's like, I will give it to nobody. And I like that. And you know what? At some points I was like empathizing with him. I was like, yeah, these people don't deserve the gold. It's ours. So, yeah, I mean, he's acting like a dick. Like, he should definitely keep his agreements. Like, he agreed to help Lake Town. He should definitely do that. But also, I do empathize with him. Like, all these people are, like, coming to his home that he just reclaimed. It's like, yeah, give me your money. And there's a good line that I like where, I mean, it's something like this. It's, let me see. Well, let me just search it up. So basically, Bard says, why does the king under the mountain fence himself in like a robber in his hold? And Thorin replies, perhaps it is because I'm expecting to be robbed. And I like that line. And it's kind of true. Like, they're all there to, like, perhaps just take over. They're only, like, 14 people or 13 people there. Like, they could just take it and, like, steal all their money. And I'm like, you know what, Thorin, you got a point there, but also you got to, like, stay true to your word and give them the money you promised. Yeah, but let's go back. Let me actually pull up the synopsis. So yeah, Thorin is like having dragon sickness where he's obsessed with gold. Same thing that happened to his grandfather. And then there's a bunch of retardation where all the orcs are coming and they're doing it for Sauron, even though that's definitely not what's going on, but we have to pretend it is because we have to make this like Lord of the Rings when it's shouldn't really need to be. And yeah, so the orcs are coming over and there's some negotiation, and basically Bilbo steals the Arkenstone. And this is what I was talking about. Like, Thorin suspected Bilbo has the Arkenstone, but it is never mentioned once by Thorin to Bilbo that he might have it. He never says, turn out your pockets, even though he suspects him in the last movie, but it's completely forgotten here. Instead, he suspects one of the other dwarfs, which doesn't make sense, but okay. And basically, Bilbo sneaks out, gives the stone to Bard, and they're like, we have what you want, you give us what you promised us, and we'll give you your little gem. And I think at this point, the orcs come, and they like kind of burrow through the mountain, and then there's a bunch of retarded action, and this is what I was talking about. Like, there was the behind the scenes footage where Peter Jackson didn't even like know what was like supposed to happen, like what had been written for the whole battle scene, and it shows. It is a bad battle scene, like genuinely stupid. It like, obviously it's passable in terms of CGI, but it's definitely not great. It's basically just like a dumb battle royale of a bunch of different people, and yeah, they're losing, and then all of a sudden Thorin is like, nah, it'll be fine, and he's like, I'm gonna go out there and be a hero, which is like cool, but I'm reminded there are like 13 dwarves against like what, 20,000 orcs? Like, what is 13 people gonna do? But naturally, oh, it gave the other dwarfs on the battlefield more like morale, and they're defeating the guys. So the tide starts to turn, and then Thorin rides up to the generic orc villain Azog and tries to kill him as if that will end the battle, which doesn't make any sense, but we're supposed to accept that. And then he dies in battle. And so does Kili, who's like the dwarf that Toria loves. That she loves him just because they had a conversation while he was in jail once. So it's a very weak romance, but like, I mean, compared to like the dumb battle, it's like more enjoyable. And yeah, it's kind of just like that. And Thorin dies, but like he kind of dies somewhat of a hero. I just wish that it was a lot more well fleshed out and the battle was better. But yeah, wasted potential, this movie, wasted Smog, made a dumb battle, tried to connect it to Lord of the Rings. Just really stupid action scenes. What's good about it is like the beginning with Thorin, where he's like going crazy. What's bad about it is he forgets that he suspected Bilbo in the last movie. And yeah. So that's Avengers Endgame meets Lord of the Rings. I'm just kidding. Avengers Endgame wasn't a stupid battle, but it's like a really bad version of that movie. Like everybody comes in at the end and is fighting. But yeah. I like the Hobbit trilogy. I don't dislike it, but if I compare it to Lord of the Rings, I do dislike it. And I just think it's a lot of missed opportunities. They should have done this movie in like either one like 3.5 hour film or something, or two something hour films. They could have done it and done it really well. And they should have just stuck to the source material, given Peter Jackson creative freedom, used less CGI, focused on Smaug as a villain, given Bilbo more to do, and just hired some decent dialogue writers that could adapt the book and make it good dialogue. Oh yeah, and then like also just like make the action scenes like way more realistic and not retarded, and just like more blood, less CGI, and stop making the elves like they're freaking straight out of freaking Guardians of the Galaxy or something. It's just too comical. Yeah, that's Hobbit in the series of crazy, ridiculous action scenes. But yeah, if you can't tell, I've been watching Lord of the Rings lately and really, really love it. I actually watched Two Towers Extended Edition, and I'm probably going to watch Fellowship Extended Edition, go back and watch it, because I already did, like a week ago, watch the regular version. I still haven't watched Return of the King, but I'm going to, but I'm saving it, because, as you know, it is my favorite. And I actually consider that like one of my favorite movies of all time. It's like I think it's number 14 or 15 or something in my list. It's really an amazing film all around, like great direction and a really, really beautiful story with like great action too. And it's just like the ultimate payoff film. But back to like the first two that I've seen so far. Yeah, Fellowship is really just perfectly and beautifully directed, and Two Towers is a fantastic kind of adventure film with a insane battle at the end. And yeah, I love it. So yeah, that's been me, Saucy Boy. Saucy Boy out.